Hey now, today we're taking a look at the game Origin from Matagot Games. Now, Matagot did a couple of other really good games that I happen to have in my collection, including Comet and Room 25, and they're known for making games that have really awesome looking artwork and components with a pretty decent theme to them as well. And the theme in Origin is that you are basically at the dawn of mankind. You're starting off with a tribe that is evolving in the heart of Africa, and you and the other players are different nomadic tribes evolving from that center tribe and sort of moving and spreading out across the map. And in gameplay terms, you're trying to meet your objectives and, of course, score points. So it's a pretty interesting theme. The artwork is definitely interesting and unique in the whole design of the game, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go ahead and give an overview of the game very briefly, then we're going to come back and I'll give you my final opinion. Alright, let's just go through a brief overview of the game Origin. The theme is that you are a nomadic tribe from the heart of Africa at the dawn of mankind. At the beginning of the game, you're going to set out one of the weakest and smallest of these tribal pawn tokens and put it in the heart of Africa, and that's where you start off from. And you try to move your nomadic tribe around the board in order to surpass the other tribes. Now, mechanically speaking, what this means is that you're trying to score objectives and get different points from the board and try to have the most points when the game end is triggered. Now this is the tribal pawn supply, and actually the rule tells you specifically to set up the box like this so you have easy access to them. You see that they come in 3 different colors and they're of different widths and heights. And this is going to be important. I'll get back to most of that in a moment, but you can always tell the height, even aside from the obvious way, but also these little notches here, the little dotted lines and segments here indicate how high they are. So they go from height 1 to height 3, and they come in 3 different strengths as well. So this would be the highest and strongest of the pawns of the sort of light brown color. And this would be, together with the one that's on the board, one of the skinniest and the weakest. And like I said, I'll get back to that in a moment as to why all of those different characteristics are important. Now, on your turn in this game, you have to take one mandatory action, and it can be of 3 different types of actions. You choose which one you want to do on your turn. At the beginning of the game, everyone's going to take the same action, which is evolving. Now, evolving involves taking one of these pawn tokens of your choice. You can take whichever one, although there are some restrictions. We'll get to that in a minute. And you're going to put it on the board together with one of your village tokens. These are the village tokens. There's 4 different colors in the game for 4 different players. You'll choose which, so just take them all at the beginning. And this represents your sort of village. Remember that you're nomads, so this will move around. You're going to choose a spot next to the starting points, and then you're going to put out a pawn. Now, there are important restrictions on how you put out a pawn. First off, 2 of the characteristics of the pawn you're putting out have to match one of the pawns that you're building next to. Now, as more and more pawns are put on the board, it's very possible, very likely, that you're going to try to evolve next to more than one pawn. You just choose one of those pawns in order to be your sort of starting point, because you're basically offspring of that tribe, so thematically that kind of works. So you choose which one you're actually acting as your starting point, but the very first player of the game must do the one that starts on the board. So in this case, we have the weakest strength and the weakest height, the lowest height, and also of the dark brown color, almost black color. So you have to have 2 characteristics in common. The third characteristic that is not common, if it's the height or the strength, has to be superior to the pawn you're building off of, or equal. You cannot have an inferior pawn of strength or height building off of it. So for that one there, I could go ahead and build this guy, because he's of a superior height, but he has the same strength and the same color, and I'll just go ahead and put him in my village there. I could alternatively do a stronger one, but it would have to be of the same, but it would have to have at least 2 characteristics. So this would be invalid, because this guy is both stronger and of a greater height, even though he's of the same color. I also could not do this pawn, because even though he's the same strength, he's of a different color and a different height. So you have to have those 2 characteristics, but certain things could possibly modify that. So for right now, let's just go ahead and do this. Now, if one of my opponents on the next turn wanted to go ahead and evolve, and you would have to at this again in the first round of the game, then they could choose any pawn as my starting point. So if they choose the pawn I just put out as their starting point, then they could go ahead and play this one because it's the same height, the same color, the same height and the same strength, just a different color. And boom, there you go. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but basically you just have to remember that you have to match 2 of the characteristics and always be stronger and higher. So that's one thing you can do on your turn, is to put out a pawn with your village token. That village token will always denote that that's your pawn. The other thing you can do is migrate. Now, each pawn has the ability to move depending on what their height is. Height 1 lets you move 1 space, height 2 lets you move 2, height 3 lets you move 3, which is pretty obvious. And you're just moving to adjacent spaces, and you can move over these straight areas, which are the red dotted lines. You can move through enemy tokens, so to speak, enemy tokens, as long as you don't stop there, and you can move through your own tokens, obviously. As long as you can move there, boom, you got it, you're done. Now, the third type of thing you can do is to swap tokens, which is essentially battling. To swap tokens, it works hand in hand with migration, so you have to have the appropriate speed, and you take a pawn of yours that is stronger than the pawn you're swapping with, and basically switch them together with their villages. So, for instance, let's just say, that I had this pawn out on the board, and I wanted to swap with green because I am stronger, because my pawn is wider. Therefore, I can make the swap as my action. I go boom, boom, no problem. Even if the guy I wanted to swap with was 3 away, that's fine because my height is 3, and that's how much speed I have. So that's all well and good. Those are the 3 actions one of the actions that you must take is of those 3 actions. But what does that actually do for you? Well, that's where we get to the rewards section. Wherever you end up with your pawn after either evolving, migrating, or swapping, you're going to get a certain type of reward. A couple of rewards are very simple, and those are the ones that are on the board. So you have these green spaces, which are hunting spaces. At the beginning of the game, you're going to randomly spawn some tokens out there of different point values, and that's essentially what they are only for. If you end on a green space and the token is still there, you get to swipe that token. End of the game, that's points for you. So this is worth 8 points. You have a 4 point out here and a 5 point, and there's always one random one put back in the box. After that, if the token is taken, green spaces don't do anything for you unless you have a certain objective, which we'll get to in a moment. The straight tokens, if you have a pawn with your village token on either side of one of the straights that still has a token there, then during the reward phase, you are allowed to take that token. Again, it is worth the amount of points that is on the token. Very simple. But once it's gone, that's it. You don't put a new one out. That's all you can do with that. The rest of the spaces on the board are color-coded to this board that's on the top here, which I know is kind of hard to see, but you basically have a yellow section, an orange section, a pink section, a brown section, and you notice that those are all the other different types of areas on the board. Now, when you end your turn, either from swapping, migrating, or evolving onto that spot, depending on the color, you'll go to that section of the board, and you can do one of 2 things. Well, it's the same thing for the yellow, orange, and purple. You're either going to take the top 3 cards from one of those stacks of cards of the appropriate color, choose one, and then shove the other 2 on the bottom of the deck. Or you're going to just randomly draw 1 card off the top of that deck and then take one of the technology tiles of your choice, if possible, from one of those different branches. So let's talk about those technology tiles first. These are all essentially spear tokens. There's always a picture of a spear. The level 1 spear tokens are just like primitive wooden spears. And they go all the way up to level 5, and there's only 2 level 5s in the game, and you see that they're much nicer spears. This artwork over here is just pointless. It doesn't really mean anything, and this is the level of the tile. Now, at the end of the game, each of those tiles is going to be worth 1 point, except for the level 5, which is worth 5 points. So that might be reason enough for you to get them. But those are also very important for the orange cards. We'll talk about those first. The orange cards are tech cards. They're basically cards that you can play on your turn. You can play 1 card of each color on your turn. That is going to give you a constant bonus that stays in front of you. So just some examples. We have the map. You can have up to 3 objective cards in your hand, because the purple cards, the objective cards, you can usually only have 2 of. But as you see, there are 3 spears here, which means you have to have a level 3 technology tile in play in order to do it. When you're making technology tiles, you have to keep escalating. So you have to first build a level 1, then you can build a level 2, then you can build a level 3, and so on. You can start a new path beginning from level 1, but you can't just put out a level 2 if you don't have a level 1 that isn't connected already, if that makes sense. Another example of a tech card. Parchment. When picking an innovation tile, you can choose from any column. So, for instance, if you landed on an orange space, you are not, and you have that tech card in play, you are not limited in taking a tile from the orange column. Last example, I'll give you the power. Starting now, you can swap with tribe pawns of the same strength. So like I said, you would have to have had, when you want to do the swap, you have to have a stronger pawn in order to swap. This lets you have the same strength. So you just can't be inferior. Now, the yellow spaces, those are action cards, which are just going to have some sort of powerful effect to mess with the other players or to put you in better territory or a better position. So control, you can swap a territory with a tribe of any strength, a one-time use. So it's sort of like the orange tech card, but it's a one-time use and you can be weaker. We have the tribal war. When you swap a territory with another player, take one of his innovation tiles following the normal restrictions of building the tech tiles. Volcanic eruption, pick up any discarded yellow card, and that's basically what the yellow cards are essentially. Now, the objective cards, the purple ones, you actually start the game, you'll deal out 3 cards to each player, and you're going to choose one that you want to keep. And these are basically point cards that you have to meet certain conditions for. So, this one requires you to have 2 tribe pawns on green territories. Play this card on your turn, you score 3 points. Then you have 3 strength 3 tribe pawns. So, if you have villages on 3 strength 3 tribe pawns on the board, you can score this card, get 4 points. Last example, I'll give you 2 level 3 innovation tiles. So if you have managed to make at least 2 chains of tiles that get up to level 3, you can score this for 6 points. You can only have 2 objective cards in your hand at any given time. If you take a third one, you'll have to discard one of them. But you can also keep scoring them on every turn if you so choose. And at the end of the game, I should mention too that any of those different colors of cards that you still have in your hand at the end of the game is going to be worth a point. So that's basically the rewards as far as all that goes. You go to a different color space, take the appropriate spot, and there's the straight tokens, the hunting tokens, all of these different things are points at the end of the game. One last thing is that I forgot to mention was the brown spaces. The brown column here, you essentially can go there, take 2 innovation tiles, which is all that's here, of your choice, or you can take 1 innovation tile from any of the other columns of your choice. That's what you can do on the brown space. So the game's basically going to continue that way. You're trying to get as many points as possible, maximize your points, and the game will end when either someone runs out of their village tokens, in other words, they're all on the board, all of the innovation tiles are gone, and every time you take an innovation tile, you'll replenish it from the stack, but eventually when all of those are gone and all of them from the board are gone, that will trigger the end. Or also if any of the different stacks of cards run out, or if the tribal pawns run out, then the end game will trigger. Every other player after the person who triggered it gets one last turn, then the game ends and you tally up your points. That's essentially Origin. Not too complex, just lots of different ways to get points. Well, you can't have a conversation about Origin without remarking on the components in the artwork of this game, which to me are just simply amazing. Madagot is known for this sort of thing, but even amongst their other games, this one stands out. Awesome wooden bits. I mean, as soon as you take that bag of bits out of the box for the first time and clunk them down on the table, everyone's going to be like, what is this? And when you have everything set up and you're in the middle of the game, you have all the wooden pawns representing the tribes on the board, and the board itself is really brightly colored, pastel-looking, crayon-looking type of board with all your little village tokens of bright colors. It's just something that catches the eye. Everyone stops and looks. I've played this in public settings. People are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, it's just a cool looking game. And while that's very superficial, it can go a long way towards selling a game. And I think that this game really needed it because essentially this is an abstract game. It's not abstract on the level of chess or Go. I mean, aside from just moving bits around the board, you have all these cards and tiles and things like that. But despite the fact that the theme is supposed to be that you're evolving your tribe in Africa and spreading out, which is a very cool theme, that is not well integrated to the mechanics of the game, which is something I'm very sensitive to. I mean, for example, the objective cards. The objective cards are supposed to be about what your tribe needs to do in order to evolve further into the world and surpass the other tribes. Nevertheless, what the actual text on the cards are is just very abstract. Have 3 tribal pawns of height 3, or have this many pawns on green spaces, or this many pawns in a certain region of the map. There's no story behind it. It doesn't explain why you need to do that, what you're actually accomplishing. The artwork on those cards is actually very basic. As a matter of fact, like the artwork on the box, which is like this really cool, I really love it, anime almost style artwork, really, really beautiful. And it's the first thing that caught my eye when I put this on my list of top 10 anticipated games for Essen last year, that artwork is not in the rest of the game. So it's very deceptive in that regard. And that would have helped, make it less abstract. But the board and all the little components and the wooden pawns, that kind of helps ease the pain of this being abstract. Because if you stripped away all of that and it looked like Chess or Go, I probably wouldn't give it a second thought. But as it is, it's a game I really enjoy. Now, it's a basic game. It's very simple. I'm not going to say it's too simple, although they do offer a junior version of the rules. Do not bother. Unless you're really playing with very young kids, the junior version basically strips out anything that's fun about the game. But with the normal version of the game, it's simple, but there is some important decision making to be had. Nothing that's going to be too brain burning, but in a weird way, I compare it to a Stefan Feld game. This is leagues away from a Stefan Feld game in a lot of ways, but they're both basically point salad games. That's the popular term to refer to Stefan Feld games nowadays. Trying to maximize your points in as many ways as possible to make as efficiently as possible, and you have different avenues and routes in order to get those points. That's kind of what Origin is. You have different routes that you can take. You can try to go after objective cards as much as possible to strategically move your tribal pawns around the board in order to score them. You can go the route of just trying to get the tokens on the board, the straight tokens, the hunting tokens. Try to get as many of those as possible because they are a lot of points, but it takes a lot of effort to get them, and it's a race to get them from the other players. You can go the tech route, get as many tiles as you can, which are all worth points, vying to get a hold of those 5-point tiles, which there's only 2 of them in the game, which is also going to enable you to make more and more tech cards, which can give you even more bonuses or help you achieve other points as well. You can go the action card route. A lot of those action cards are very powerful when used strategically, but you have to make that choice. Which area you're going to go to, which reward are you going to go to. It's not overly thinky. This is not a difficult game to comprehend or play, but there's enough meat there that I think that if you're looking for a game to introduce people to more complex Euro games or complex abstract games, or if you yourself are just looking for an entry-level point that looks amazing, this is the kind of game that's going to fill that niche. It just works. There's enough there. There's enough meat there for hardcore gamers, but enough there that it's not too complex for people new to the hobby. There's maybe people who have played abstract games like Chess and Go, and you're trying to transition them into the type of games that we love the most. So I think it really succeeds in that regard. A couple of wonky things. I am not a fan. Well, by the very nature of the game, when you're evolving the tribal pawns, you have to do the characteristic matching. So 2 of your characteristics have to match. One of them can be different, but you can't have an inferior pawn. It has to either be of a greater height or a greater strength, or the same. So it's either got to be identical, with maybe the one characteristic being the different color, or it's got to be higher or stronger. And that's fine. That works mechanically. It's a little bit wonky the first time you do it because you're going to be constantly backtracking and saying, let me get that pawn there. Oh, that doesn't match. Let me get that one. No, you can't do that. That's going to happen a lot in your first game. And it might even happen in your second game as well. You'll get used to it, but it can be very hard. There's just so much going on. Well, there's not a lot going on, but there's so many different types of pawns that you can choose from that it can be a bit overwhelming. That's kind of a quibble. Again, this is something that's sort of a sacrifice you have to make in order for the game to look as good as it does with those pawns. But it is something to bear in mind. I think that it can be easy to tell who's going to win the game fairly early because, especially when it comes to the hunting tokens, those hunting tokens are worth a lot of points, and while it can be a race to get to them, you don't have to put forth a lot of effort. There's not a lot of strategy involved in just racing to get those tokens as quickly as possible. And at the same time, if you get a lucky draw of objective cards, then you could be fortunate enough to go after them and also at the same time be working towards scoring those objectives, which is easy points. But that's just a little bit of randomness in the game. It's not too bad. The time, the game length, the first game is probably going to take you about 90 minutes just because of that little wonkiness I said of figuring out how you're going to place the pawns and what all the different cards do and things like that. And that's with the full complement of players, I would say 90 minutes. But after you get over that hump of the first game, it's a fast game. I think with full complement, probably an hour. With less players, probably even less time. It goes very quickly. The turns go quickly. Even someone who's prone to analysis paralysis, what you should do on your turn is, fairly obvious. You may have different options, but generally speaking, you've made your decision at the start of the game what route you're going to go and what you're trying to be focusing on. So turns can go very, very quickly. All in all, I like this game a lot. It's pleasantly surprised me. There's certain people who are not going to like it just because even though I find the art style beautiful, a lot of people might not. And also, it is a fairly simple game, but there is a contingent of people in my group who are definitely not hardcore gamers. They just want to play fun, light games, and this is the game I would definitely suggest the next time we get together. I give it a thumbs up. I recommend it. I think Madagot has another hit on their hands if people can actually recognize it for what it is and pay attention to it. It does deserve some more attention. My name is Nick from Board Game Brawl. This has been my review of Origin, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.